Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. I hope this video finds you in a safe place both internally and externally. If you want 20 minutes of diversion, I'm here with a story that would have been too scary for me to live through. I think if this happened to me, I'd have died of fright. It still might not be as scary as current events out there right now, but this one is, I think, one of the scarier stories we've had in a while. Oh, I'm really happy to announce that today's executive producer is Nicola Scammell. Thank you to today's EP, whose name we say Nicola. Their contributions are as sweet as any Coca-Cola. Of course, that name could be pronounced Nicola just as well, and the last name could be either Scammell or perhaps Scammell. I think I need a pronunciation guide and also an IQ boost. Thank you, NS. All joking aside, we genuinely are grateful to you for your contributions and hope you're enjoying your over 9 hours of scary, uncensored Dogman stories, available either from our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com or else by clicking the join button below this video. And speaking of videos, it's time we got on with this one, which we call Locked in a Room with Dogman Outside. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a story for you about the Dogman that happened just the other day in a small forested town in New Jersey. It happened to me personally, and I've still not told anyone else in my family or outside about the sighting. You'll understand why as I explain the whole thing, but you'll also probably get why I have to tell someone. I'm not going to give the exact location it happened in, but I will say it's closer to Wilmington. It happened during a rainstorm, so that fits in with theories I've heard on your show. It happened in a way embarrassing to me personally, so I'm leaving my name out of it. But I will mention the name of my rotten little nephew, without whom there would be no story to tell at all. None of our family are rich, but we've been staying in this old, formerly grand mansion that's now more like a cruddy flophouse with beautiful woodwork and expensive paintings and art all over the place. My aunt had inherited it from a relative of her mother's grandfather that none of us was related to by blood at all. Apparently, that side of the family had died out, and somehow this place, too expensive for us to keep up, had ended up in my aunt's hands. She was beginning the process of selling it earlier this year and auctioning off the insides, but then the virus thing hit, and she decided to use the house to gather her family together under one roof where she and my mom could lecture us all more effectively than ever before. I have to say it's weird staying in the mansion, but I do appreciate the unique moment in time. This place has had such a history, but soon it'll be sold and maybe redone or even torn down. To me, it'll be basically torn down as soon as I leave. And this is the only time I'll ever get to be in this completely unique building. On the other hand, I'm here with too many other people, and we all have to chip in to do chores keeping the huge place up since obviously there's no money for servants or anything like that. We've begun calling my aunt and my mother the two moms, as they seem to be deeply enjoying giving us these Ward Cleaver lectures about every single event that happens in the fake news. They get angry if you say businesses should reopen. They want this moment to last forever. Both of the two moms keep telling us that we're fortunate, that we have money and food and shelter. We can afford to look at this as one long extended family get-together, while so many others are suffering around the country. The worst thing we have to fear is boredom, and we have no right to complain about that at a time like this. I had agreed with the ideas when they first started saying them. The worst thing we have to fear is boredom, and also that my girlfriend might get interested in another guy if this stretches on for any longer. She's back in Hoboken, and I'm over on the other side of Jersey from that. We talk online, but a long-distance relationship is not a real-life one. I know, because I've done both, and so I'm going to be insecure until, or unless, I can get back in my girlfriend's life in a real way very soon. None of that matters except to let you know my state of mind as all this stuff was about to happen. I was kind of stressing myself out, worrying about things I had no control over, but trying to control it anyway. I was distracted, and I kind of had my head up my own butt, not really listening to what people were saying around me. I was so lost in the fear of the imagined future where I had lost my girlfriend that I was making myself sick in the present moment and being rude to my family and my cousins in the process. At the time, I was really mad at my little cousin Rudy for what he did to me, but I can't blame him anymore. This was a situation that reminded me what it was like to have something real to worry about. So what happened was the adults and some of the older kids went off to do a big shopping trip last week in the evening, and I got forced to stay home and babysit the younger kids. The two girls are fine, but my little cousin Rudy is a terror. He's a born practical joker. Still, like I said, in retrospect, I can't blame him for being a kid and doing kid things, even though what happened afterward could have gotten me seriously hurt, or even worse. Basically, I was letting the kids run loose and wild, giving them time warnings as bedtime grew closer, like 90 minutes till bedtime, then an hour till bedtime, and so forth. It was how I would have wanted to be treated by babysitters. As long as I didn't break anything, I should be allowed to have fun and then go to bed on time. I was lost in my phone, and I was hoping that me granting the kids freedom would result in them respecting me back in the same way. Well, when it was finally bedtime, I stood outside Rudy's door, and he surprised me by running up from behind and bumping into me. I was knocked off balance and stumbled into his room, only to hear that brat slam the door behind me and lock me inside, giggling the whole time. Why that old house even has bedrooms that can be locked from the outside is creepy enough, although it's on the ground floor and somewhat small, so probably in the past it had been something other than a bedroom. I wondered what used to be there back then. Now, there was one small bed, a night table, a tiny closet, and one window looking out onto the woods in the back. I wouldn't even be able to see when the adults got home. The driveway was on the other side of the house. I wondered how long I would be locked in there before I got rescued. I had foolishly put my phone down for a minute before I got locked in here. I had no way to contact anyone. Lightning flashed outside, and I watched the rain falling down. The others weren't going to be back for an hour or longer, so I watched the rain falling on the trees a ways back, and I watched it fall on the grass lawn in front. After a while, it felt peaceful to be there. I was glad I didn't have my phone with me because now I had permission to stand there and veg out for a while, staring at nature getting rained on. I don't really give myself permission to watch things like rainstorms very often. I'm always busy doing this or studying that so I can do that later. It was actually an increasingly nice experience watching the trees and leaves blowing back and forth in the breeze, dripping wet all over. I found myself breathing more deeply and feeling good for the first time since the family had moved in together. And that's when I first noticed the Dogman. It wasn't like I saw eyes shine first or made out a silhouette that eventually turned out to be Dogman or anything like that. It was just like all of a sudden, while looking out at the woods, I noticed that there was a Dogman there. It was a dog-headed, werewolf-type creature with dog-like hind legs that it somehow stood bipedally on. I didn't notice it walking up. I just noticed when it was there at the edge of the woods, standing mainly in shadow and looking off to my right. It was dark out, but it was darker by the trees. It did have lightly glowing eyes, but they glowed more when seen peripherally than when looked at directly. That was when I did my next foolish thing. I said, "Wow," and I ran to the window to see it more clearly. I've gotten so used to enlarging images on screens that I basically did the real-life equivalent of that before considering any of the possible consequences of what I was doing. Of course, that Dogman out there was not pixels on a screen. It was some kind of something real. I don't want to say it was a living creature because some people think that isn't what they are. I just know it looked like a mammalian dog-like thing. And when I looked at it, that Dogman turned and looked right back at me. That was the most terrifying moment of my life up to that point. But it was nothing compared to the stuff I was about to have to live through. The creature's eyes looked deep black, blacker than normal darkness. There was no light at all emanating from them when our gazes locked. In fact, it was more like I felt him trying to reach inside me and grab me from inside his eyes, or inside himself. I felt myself being pulled toward him, and at the same time, he seemed to be running toward my window. I couldn't tell the difference between the two, and I forced myself to step back from the glass. I remember turning the bed on its side and hiding behind it as the Dogman ran directly to the window and began barking this freakish version of a dog bark at me. I don't even know how to begin to explain it, but the main thing is that it sounded every bit as vicious as any trained fight or attack dog. It sounded like it meant business. I have encountered some dogs that were disagreeable to me in my life, and I've always been able to calm them through food. Of course, those were pets, not forest predators, and it didn't matter because the only food I saw around in that room was some popcorn spilled on the floor from earlier. I peeked up over the bed, and the monster dog was right up by the window, in the rain, fogging the glass up each time he barked at me inside the room. I'll try to give the best description I can from memory, but at the time, I wasn't trying to remember details. I was scared, and I was looking for some sign, some expression that I might not really be in danger. I was hoping to see indications that everything would be okay, but everything about that Dogman looked fierce, in the worst possible meaning of that word. It looked like it knew I was in there. It knew I was hiding from it, and I wouldn't be hiding from it unless I was something that tasted good. Those words popped into my head as I remembered my father once explaining why our dog had his nose in a rabbit hole for so long. The dog saw that rabbit go in there, so he figured sooner or later it would have to come out the same way. Of course, the rabbit came out somewhere else and made the dog look foolish. I remember thinking that rodents are smarter than dogs back at that time. That wasn't the lesson my father wanted me to take away, but that was the one that stuck in my mind. It was easy for the rabbit to evade that dog because the dog was incredibly dumb, vicious, and short-sighted. In other words, the Dogman outside wasn't going to be going away for a long time because everything I had done since it saw me was telling its old lizard mind inside there that I must be something that tasted good. A dog will wait for hours for something that tastes good to come out, even if it makes no sense to do so. They don't really reason. They just win by persistence. I, on the other hand, could reason, or so I reasoned. If the rabbit could outsmart the dog, then surely I, a human being, should be able to outsmart a Dogman. I'm as smart as a rabbit, aren't I? So I figured if hiding made me seem like prey, then revealing myself to the Dogman would allow him to see that I was a predator like him. I was not prey. I was a fellow carnivore or omnivore or whatever. Most stories I've heard, monsters will try to scare humans off their turf, but they mostly don't attack, because I think that most of the time they think that we're just too much trouble. So, gathering my courage, I stood up slowly, trying to act casual. flipped on the light switch, brightening up the room from overhead, and walked out from behind that overturned bed. The Dogman flipped out. If he was angry before, he was livid now. He jumped up and down, snarling and barking and growling and trying to push his face through that glass to get at me inside that tiny room. My instinct was to run back behind the bed, but I decided to act casual as I could and wait for the beast to tire himself out and calm down. The frustrated dog would leap sometimes up onto the outside wall as though it were thinking that it could somehow jump over the window to get in that way. When it would do so, I could briefly get views of its lower body, which was remarkably like that of a regular dog. A large dog, but still a regular dog. It certainly looked monstrous, but not magical or paranormal in any way. Patches of fur missing on the belly revealed skin discolorations that were clearly defined as a biological living creature. The body was really shockingly like a canine's in terms of anatomy. I say shocking because nothing about the movements of the creature spoke to that apparent anatomy. It was as though a dog body were being CGI acted by a human actor and holographically projected in front of me. The problem with that theory, though, is that holographic projections don't fog up rainy glass with their breath. I don't feel I'm describing the dog well enough, but that's basically because it was an angry dog. It was dark, its hair was not that long, but not that short, sort of shaggy, and it tapered off in the front from the belly on down, just like on most dogs. How it stood so upright like that, far more upright than you would see a chimp or gorilla do, I just don't really know. I've seen dogs manage that for brief moments, but this was a bipedal dog whose body posture was somehow far more human-like than any ape or monkey I've ever seen. But it was still more like a dog in appearance than a man. It didn't look like a caveman with a dog head. It looked like a dog standing upright. Maybe a way to explain it would be to say that if I showed you a still picture of it on that night, you would say that is a dog. But if I showed you video of it throwing its temper tantrum outside the window on that night, you would say that is a Dogman. Of course, I could do neither because my little brat of a nephew had locked me in there without my cell phone. Well, that Dogman barked at me as I stood there in the lit room, and I waited for him to tire himself out. I kept waiting for a while, and I have to say it was all I could do to keep myself from crying. That was the scariest thing I'd ever seen, and it was not calming down. It was only getting angrier. It seemed even more upset to see me standing there not even hiding. Instead of seeing me as more of an equal to him, my display had only made him angrier at me personally. I turned to go back behind the bed, and I almost fell down. I realized then that I was paralyzed with fear, and my mouth was very dry. I had to hold onto the bed to get behind it, then I slipped as I set myself down uncomfortably. The dog was growing progressively angrier than I would have thought it could possibly get. Somehow, it seemed to be setting new records in being mad, that it would then instantly break when it saw the next thing I did. All of my decisions had been the wrong ones. I realized this as my legs fell asleep and I had to move to a new position to restart the blood flow. The Dogman outside was now banging on the wall near the window. I started crying because I wasn't so sure that he couldn't knock that wall down, and if he figured out that glass breaks more easily than wood, he was going to be able to get into that tiny room with me, and he was going to make my evening just that much more uncomfortable. When I moved my legs out in front of me and began massaging them, I accidentally knocked a broom over, and it turned out the room lights. Unexpectedly, at least to me, The Dogman seemed confused by that development. It stopped barking at first, then would occasionally let out a confused yip or yap here or there. I heard it running around the yard quickly, as though working off great frustration, or perhaps celebrating some kind of a victory. Maybe it thought that when the light went out, it meant that I had left. Maybe he felt he had scared me off. He had shown me who was the dominant male or whatever. If so, I didn't want to intrude on his victory. If he thought there was nothing more to see here, he might be on his way, and then I could go back to worrying about getting out of this small locked room. It turned out, the door was unlocked and opened by my aunt as she carried Rudy to bed. To say she was confused as to why I was sitting behind her son's overturned bed in the dark would be an understatement. I quickly put the bed back in place, tidying it up, and a sleepy Rudy told her I was defending the house against monsters. Little did he know how right he was. She thought it was a game I had been playing with the kids, so although she disapproved, she dismissed me from the room. You know, I really don't care if they think I'm a bad babysitter, because I am a bad babysitter, and I'd rather go on shopping trips with them than stay at home with those ungrateful brats and the Dogman outside. As soon as I can get some paying work, I'm moving to a city, someplace where they don't riot, but still have tall apartment buildings that Dogman will never set foot inside of. In the meantime, I'm with my family, wondering if my girlfriend in Hoboken is still my girlfriend in Hoboken. Oh, and remember how I said that I don't hold a grudge against my little cousin Rudy? Well, that's true. It's partially because it was kind of my own fault for not paying attention. But the other half of it is, I know that the monster Rudy told his mom I was defending the house from is real. The little brat thought he was making it up, but I had an ordeal with the thing. I know it's a Dogman. I know, sooner or later, he'll be coming back. I know he hates humans. And I know that my little snot of a creep of an ungrateful little cousin is sleeping in that room every night. It's like a game of Dogman roulette. Will he come back to scare the pants off the little jerk tonight? Or will it be tomorrow night? It would be a shame if someone heard Rudy screaming in fear from the Dogman and accidentally locked that door from the outside, because then the poor little guy might find himself locked in a room with Dogman outside. It's opening day of Esoteric Baseball here at Apple Field in New York City. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. We are presenting a limited series of cartoon baseball games to tide ourselves over until real baseball comes back. And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.